From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and All India Radio, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell, back at Old Trafford in Manchester, night 27 in the bio bubble for me. I tell you what, Shane Warne and Wasim Akram have entered since I've been down in Southampton. It's like some sort of strange cricketing big brother here. I'd perhaps say Love Island, but I'm not going there. But it is like an eviction when you see somebody leaving the bubble and wheeling their suitcase out into the car park and everybody waves goodbye. But we're all back in for this test series now against Pakistan.
Well, you need that guitar. I don't know whether you need any of Warnie's SW23, but apparently he's knocking it around the place. Maybe it's more for boys than the girls, but it's his new line of deodorant or something. And
hopefully we won't be needing it.
So it's just a tonic for everyone. He's probably having more fun than most of us down under. Certainly Sydney's in better shape than Melbourne in that regard, but it's hard to think ahead with a clear picture of how things are going to go. And that goes for many other places in the world too. But there's a degree of good and bad luck around these things, it seems, and the way this pandemic has been transmitted. So hopefully in New South Wales, we're able to stay COVID-free, relatively speaking. But it's all a bit shaky. And I think the Aussie cricketers will be happy to get out of the place and go and play in England, if it comes off.
Well, I'm Charu Sharma for All India Radio in Bangalore, where we continue to be very confused about locking down and opening up. Nothing really seems to be working, but more on that later. India also, for the moment, needs to deal with its annual flooding menace because the monsoon's high. The northeast typically gets flooded. And as you may have read, Mumbai went through a 24-hour spell of some 300 millimeters, got flooded completely. Happens every year. And that adds to all the problems that India is facing right now. So I'm afraid life and sport continue to be in some trouble.
Well, we know how much a state of a disaster it is from a sporting perspective because there's no Aussie rules. Can you believe that being played in Melbourne? They're playing this carnival of matches, 20 games in 20 days in Adelaide and Brisbane, mainly, not even much in Sydney. So the only good thing for people in Melbourne, if they're rusted on to Collingwood or something, is that they can watch or listen to some footy every evening. But there's not much else that's good about the place. There's so many restrictions and curfews, and you wonder, well, economically it's going to have a massive impact, but how long is this going to run for before they can be convinced that they're on top of it? But when you're getting numbers that, a bit like the United States, just keep going north, not south every day, it doesn't look like there's any immediate end to this pandemic. It is very worrying indeed.
And Charu, the situation seems just as bleak in India with the rapid rise in daily infections.
Well, I'm afraid that is the truth because every day India comes up with more positive cases. And Jim mentioned the US, but I think India is a very close second and perhaps Brazil. So, and of course, we certainly have the numbers, don't we? 1.3 billion. So if the number keeps going up, it'll be massive, completely out of control. But through all of that, I must admit there have been a couple of positive news situations as well, with the number of recoveries being very high, and I believe higher than the number of new positive cases, which may, of course, depend on the testing as well. And also the mortality rate is pretty low as considered on a global scale of under 2%. So that's just a sort of a silver lining. But yeah, it's unabated. And here too in Bangalore and Karnataka, the state I live in, there just seems to be no stopping it.
In cricketing terms, and we discussed on the show last week, reported dates for a rescheduled IPL in the UAE. And at least this week there has been confirmation of that. But obviously, yes, not taking place in India.
Yes, Alison, the dates have been announced. It's September 19 to November 10. But, you know, that's the easiest part of it. I think all the hard work still has to be done. I think the many protocols that still have to be put into place in the UAE for the BCCI, all the players, and of course the franchisees who, by the way, are seeking more and more concessions from the BCCI. So it's not, you know, going to be easy at all. I'd mentioned that earlier, saying that the logistics and all the management in the UAE is not going to be easy. And to top it all, of course, the title sponsor yesterday, you may have heard, actually backed out themselves, which is another major blow commercially to the IPL. I'm sure that the BCCI will get hold of another sponsor. I believe some kind of system is in place now. But considering the shortage of time, I'm sure that the amount might not be similar to the previous title sponsor. So there are no shortages of problems for the moment for the IPL, but the dates, yes, have been announced.
Jim, the dates posed a bit of an issue, though, for some down under in Australia, because there's a women's T20 challenge. It's sort of become known as a women's IPL, but it's a T20 challenging tournament, involves 3 teams. It's played during IPL playoff week. So, of course, that has now shifted to this new window with the men's IPL, but it means it suddenly clashes with the women's Big Bash in Australia, and that didn't please the Aussie wicketkeeper, opening bat Alyssa Healy, and others who want to play in both.
Well, perhaps I could fill in the blanks, because I'm sure Alyssa would have been quite outspoken on this had she chosen to be. So what is the answer? Tell Sourav Ganguly that he's got it all wrong. The event itself will be diminished if the Australians aren't playing in it. So you either shift that event or shift the WBBL. I mean, having a clash is just ridiculous. Charu, what's going on? Is this the heavy-handedness of the BCCI again?
Well, Jim, on one hand, I'm glad that the women are getting a shot during the IPL, because it's not quite a league. It's just a small format tournament. But yes, I mean, all that's needed to be done if you want the best international players to also be a part of that women's competition, if not league, is to shift the dates. Why have it during the playoffs? Because there's enough attention on the IPL and the playoff teams at that point anyway. Mind you talked about Sourav Ganguly. His position in the BCCI is also under question mark right now because of, the long legal sort of tangle that the board had gotten into all these years. So, I mean, no shortage of problems. But yeah, I do hope for the international women's sake, and particularly the Australians, that it can be advanced. No reason why it cannot be advanced.
Well, I do see that with the COVID pandemic as it is, there's going to be a lot of clashes this year. It's not ideal, and there will have to be some give and take. There was a handful of Indian players who are due to play in the WBBL, probably more Australian players who are hoping to play in these T20 challenge matches who feel that they are missing out. But I mean, a huge positive that India are saying, yes, we're sticking with the women's T20, and we're not just going to let that sit by the wayside with all the other challenges that are being faced. So that is an advance and a sign of commitment for me. The women's game has an opportunity in normal time to have a blank canvas and not make all the mistakes that the men's game and the pickle that the men's game is in terms of scheduling. But I do think, I hope that this is seen as a one-off. It is COVID times, and the players would have to take time to come out to quarantine, then play in quarantine on return to Australia or their home countries as well. So even bringing the dates forward might have made it logistically difficult to come back in time for a WBBL.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Considering we're in this bio-bubble environment, yes, there are no spectators. The West Indies were in the bio-bubble for some 50 days. So how will Pakistan plan to avoid burnout? Have a listen to head coach Misbah ul Haq.
You cannot just say anything before that time, but at the moment, nothing like that. Everybody is good. Their mental health, they look good. They're enjoying as a team, and obviously looking forward. They got no issues with that. Good team bonding in the team. They're having fun. They're enjoying their cricket. So at the moment, things are good. And obviously, Test cricket is different. Once you are in, pressures just build sometimes because of the performances and different things. But we'll just try to keep it like that so they are mentally fresh. And regardless of the results, it'll be easy. And just concentrate on their performances.
Well, listening to that is Wasim Khan, Chief Executive of the Pakistan Cricket Board. Wasim, welcome back to Stumped.
Thank you, Ali. Nice to be back.
Good to have you. Yeah, good to see you as well. On our Zoom screen we've got here. Some early nerves perhaps to getting all the players over here after 10 of the squad tested positive for COVID-19 back in June. Just give us a bit of insight into the amount of work that went on behind the scenes to get this tour happening.
Yeah, it started back a couple of months ago when the ECB presented online to myself and some of the other staff on some of the biosecure work that they were doing around the venues, what provisions they would put in place for the players to keep them safe when they were here. We had the players tested on around about the 20th of June. We had a chartered flight booked on the 28th of June. Of the 29 players, 10 of those came back positive. So it was a bit of a stressful time because we needed to get 2 negative tests within a 4-day period in order to get the guys on the plane. So we managed to get 19 on the plane. Thankfully, of the 10, 8 of the players were white ball specialists. So it meant that it didn't disrupt the preparation for the test matches. And, the guys got here and then we were drip feeding some of the other players back into England to get us to the full complement. And that's exactly where we are now.
You mentioned the conversations you've had with Johnny Grave. We were just flagging up there the issue of the length of time of players spending in this bio-bubble environment. You've experienced it for a day here at Old Trafford. What advice maybe was Johnny able to give about how players can manage their time and keep themselves in a fresh state of mind the longer the tour goes on?
I think with something like this, Ali, it was really critical that we got the right support staff, knowing what the players were going to expect here. So getting Mushtaq Ahmed, someone who's great at man managing, very important that we got him on the tour. And then getting someone like Yunus, who's very measured in many ways and he's very respected by the boys, to get people like him to support Waqar and Misbah. And I think having that complement of players, we had a long conversations prior to them leaving with those 4 support staff about the pressures they were going to find in a biosecure environment and, how that was going to be managed and how that was going to be done. And, they had some really, really good plans of how they were going to manage that.
You also mentioned, Wasim, that it's very important to get the right support staff. And just on the mental, psychological front, because you've got a long series coming up, a long quarantine, lockdown, whatever, maybe not as much practice. So is the mental aspect being handled well enough, you think? Are all the players 100% in that regard?
Yeah, look, I speak quite regularly to Misbah and the support staff, and, the guys are, they've adapted very, very well. They, we spoke long and hard with them prior to coming about what they were going to face when they were here. And of course, we had the West Indies to speak to as well. In many ways, the fact that there's only 3 days in between each test match has also got its pluses as well. I know there's going to be a bit of wear and tear on the bodies, but it means there isn't an extended period of time when these guys are sitting around after each test match. So actually that is a bit of a blessing as well. I think they'd rather be in competition, playing and involved, rather than sitting around for 7 days in between test matches.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Next to a famous day for Irish cricket.
Kevin O'Brien, he's hit the ball and he's got the run, and Ireland have done it.
Played
Would
Ireland.
you believe it? It's Kevin O'Brien, the hero of Bangalore 2011. He's the hero again in Southampton in 2020. I can barely talk. They've done it again.
Oh, how did you enjoy that, Jim Charu? Michael McNamee, that was. Ireland's first ever win over England in England. Well, with us now is Richard Holdsworth, Ireland's High Performance Director. Richard, you must still be beaming. Welcome to Stumped.
Thanks very much, Alison. Yes, look, certainly with these days don't come about too often. And look, it's tremendous to be now playing in this World Cup Super League, because our route to Test cricket and full membership was a long one. We had a lot of success along the way, but the thing that's been troubling us, I suppose, most is getting enough international cricket. You can't develop players, get experience and perform in these pressurised moments without that. And to get a 3-match series with England is really down to the World Cup Super League. And the fact that we were 2-0 down in the series, normally that would be a dead series, a dead rubber. But now this is the real deal. And these games matter. And for us, grabbing 10 points in that last match was critical.
Hi, Richard. This is Charu Sharma. I'm speaking from Bangalore, the scene of that stunning victory of Ireland against England, the 2011 World Cup. Now, and you mentioned a bit earlier about the media that surrounds this and not much else on television. And of course, being much closer to home and beating England right next door, does this win therefore rank about as where the World Cup victory ranked?
It's a really interesting question, Charu, and I think some of the players have said, well, it comes pretty close. I guess the difference was, one was in a World Cup, so it was huge. The eyes the whole cricketing world the eyes were on that game in Bangalore. It was an England game. But look, I think beating England in any format is huge. Beating the world champions is even bigger. And with a team in transition, with a lot of youngsters without very many caps, we had 3 players who played less than 10 ODIs in that game. So I think putting all of that together, it was certainly on a par with Bangalore.
What does happen now? Because the pandemic has meant that you've lost games against Zimbabwe, Bangladesh, New Zealand and Pakistan. It's a huge amount of cricket lost. There's nothing scheduled now until for the rest of this year. It seems unbelievable. What is next? What will you do? Are you looking to play other games? Can you play other games?
Yeah, it's a really big question, Alison, and one that's been, I guess, on our minds for the last few months as the situation has sort of progressed further. I had a call with ICC yesterday where obviously all members are looking at rescheduling their FTP. What can we fit in where? I think the other thing that's slightly tricky for us is that we put a plan of 14 to 18 months ahead of these games. Now, this England series wasn't due to start until September. So that's all changed a little bit now, and let's all hope that the pandemic has gone away, or we found a vaccine, and we can have a proper summer season next year. That's the hope.
We've got to hope so. It's like throwing the piece of the jigsaw in the air and then fitting them all back together again.
Yeah.
Richard, we appreciate your time. Good luck with all of that, and congratulations on the Ireland win. It was a fantastic watch. It really was. Well, that's it for this week's Stumped here on All India Radio. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter. We're at BBCWS Sport. Use the hashtag BBC Stumped. Thanks to Charu Sharma and Jim Maxwell, our special guests Wasim Khan and Richard Holdsworth, and of course to you for listening. Join us again next time. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.